So Lisa's going to talk to you now about why security matters. Like I've talked about our journey so far, why we've gone to the cloud, but one of the big parts of going there was to ensure that we had all the security in place.
Cool. So as Ed was saying, as part of our move to the cloud and our new premises, we had to ensure that we maintained adequate information security. And cyber security, cyber threats are a real consideration for basically anyone who has access to the internet. It's safe to say that these threats are not going away anytime soon. And although the media coverage sort of comes and goes in waves, the reality is that this stuff is always going on. The recent wave of attacks that hit the NZX and other New Zealand businesses were not New Zealand specific. They were part of a global wave of attacks. But I think what that really brings home is the fact that although New Zealand is geographically far away from the rest of the world, we're not immune, and actually from a tech perspective, we're right in the mix of it all. In terms of the latest attacks, well, the nature of attacks are constantly evolving, and what we've seen is the attacks have been quite dynamic, meaning that when you are hit, it's sort of like a bit of a game of whack-a-mole where you're constantly just you're getting attacked and you're trying to deal with it in lots of different ways. The recent attacks were DDoS attacks, which are distributed denial of service attacks, which is essentially bombarding a website with thousands of times more traffic than they're designed to take. And that's sort of combined with a ransomware element where the perpetrator comes to you and says, hey, are you hating this? You can pay us a bit of money and we'll stop. So I know this sounds a bit doom and gloom and maybe even feels a bit pointless to try and fight it when we know that even some of the businesses that were hit in New Zealand had gold star security systems. But it's one of those things where the more prepared you are and the more robust your systems, the more resilient you are to one of these attacks. And there's also a few pretty good reasons why you should care. So the first is business impacts. So obviously if you're hit with something like this, it causes quite a lot of disruption, particularly during COVID and lockdown, where some businesses, the only way that they're able to interact with their clients are online. And so if you're being hit and you're not able to function online, then that's going to cause a whole bunch of disruption, and that's going to lead to a whole bunch of financial losses as well. Not to mention the whole extortion theft element of it and the costs of bringing people in to help you remediate those systems. You've also got the risk of loss of IP and data theft, brand and reputation damage, and loss of customer trust. The legal exposure that can come with that in terms of breaches of data security, and then ultimately loss of shareholder value as well. So that's the business drivers, and if that's not enough for you, there's some good legal reasons why information security matters. So under the Companies Act, directors have various duties to the company that they are directors of, and one of those is the duty of care. And the New Zealand Institute of Directors has said that this duty of care includes protecting information and other digital assets, and that cybersecurity has to be seen as an enterprise-wide risk management issue. So this is not something that you can kind of pass off to your IT security team. It's something that you need to be aware of and needs to be revisited over and over again. It's also not good enough, particularly in the current climate, for directors to say that they simply didn't know about cybersecurity. So this is something that really needs to be held front of mind. And if that's not enough, there's other legal obligations. So under the Privacy Act, an agency holding personal information must have security safeguards in place to prevent the unauthorized use or disclosure of personal information. And for us, in terms of our tech transformation journey, we have additional obligations that we had to consider as well. So the Lawyers and Conveyancers Act covers the lawyers' ethical obligations in terms of client conduct and care. And that basically says that we need to have appropriate systems in place to ensure that information remains confidential, that we must take reasonable steps to prevent any person from perpetrating a crime or fraud through our practice, because obviously law firms are a great target for anyone looking to perpetrate an attack. You're getting the information of lots of clients and probably all of the juicy stuff. Not that I'm advertising that we should attack a law firm, but that is something that we really need to consider and be aware of. And the rule specifically refers to taking reasonable steps to ensure the security of access to electronic systems and passwords.
But as Suzanne Paul would say, but there's more. There's the Privacy Act 2020, obviously enacted coming to force into this year, which will place data breach notification obligations on basically organisations to report data breaches. So it's a long time coming, but it's going to be good that we've actually got something which is a bit more applicable in today's cloud environment. So we've also got sort of customer expectations. So, we've got, as a director of a company, you have obligations. As lawyers, we have obligations as well as under the Privacy Act. But customers are also expecting that suppliers identify what cybersecurity measures they have. So we, like I said before, we act for a lot of suppliers who are trying to, sign deals with customers, and their customers who are generally large corporates who are asking, what kind of cybersecurity measures do you have in place to protect our data from, being misused or stolen or lost? And a lot of our clients will, as vendors, will need to go through a checklist or a report type thing where they have to provide their customer with an assurance that their data is secure. And so that's what we're seeing from a vendor side. And obviously, if we're active with a customer, we'd be asking certain suppliers to provide that too. Now, that's being applied to law firms as well, and not just law firms, but accounting firms, anyone who holds data or who is a custodian of information. So we have quite regularly, we are asked by our clients to provide a letter setting out, what type of cybersecurity measures do you have in place? And so we'll basically say that this is what we have without identifying exactly what we've got, because that would sort of tell everyone how to get in. But what we're finding now is with new clients or pitching for sort of new work, we're having to go through those sort of cybersecurity type checks as well. So some of the questions that are asked, I've asked, but also of our clients who are vendors, do you have a dedicated role assigned for cybersecurity within a firm? Have you got cybersecurity controls that have been independently audited or tested? Are your information security staff professionally certified? That's probably more relevant for a supplier who's providing SaaS services, probably not so much for a law firm, but who knows, might happen in the future. Are systems regularly security penetration tested? Sometimes the customer might ask for it to be done, at least once or twice a year. And they might also ask how a firm detects and responds to a cyber attack. So there's a lot of information that a customer might ask of you, certainly of us, if you're going to provide services to them.
And quite fairly as well, I guess.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So how have we improved and maintained our security? Look, we've had, from the day that we started, we've implemented a whole lot of security measures from a physical and a technical perspective, things that you would expect from a law firm. So, the usual suspects around, physical, like a clear desk policy, making sure that swipe cards, secure destruction of documents or shredding, all of that kind of stuff is already there. But we sort of took the opportunity as part of our digital transformation move to a new office to kind of have a look at how we could improve things. And one of the things that we did probably better is that from an organisation point of view, we took a real a top-down approach. There was always when the firm started with, say, 8 people, it was kind of okay, communicate to them, hey, it's really important to look after your customer data and all that kind of stuff. But as the firm grew from like 8 to 30, we've had to sort of instill in all of our staff, and they already know this because it's, you know, as a lawyer, that's what you're supposed to do, but kind of from a top-down approach to say, look, you know, your customer data is really important. It's valuable to them. It's valuable to basically anyone who gets it. So therefore, you need to secure that information and make sure it's not taken. So we've put in place policies and guidelines to address things around IT security, you know, what you can and can't do with your laptops or your devices, what you can access through your devices, but also ensuring that there is that training and awareness, and we try and do that once or twice a year, especially because we've got new people starting all the time, and so that's part of the like the induction process, but also it's always a good reminder to have it done every so often. And we had one yesterday where we basically had a firm training session on basically IT security, and that's because of like recent attacks and things like that.
It's kind of making it part of our culture.
Yeah. And obviously as a like tech, media and IP law firm, and that's what we advise on. So we've got to practice what we preach. From a physical perspective, like when we moved offices, so I was sort of involved in the design of the tech side of things. We put in CCTV, not to monitor ourselves and our staff, but just to ensure that we knew who was accessing the building. I know in our previous place that we worked, there were, you know, people who could access different floors and things like that, and there wasn't kind of the CCTV that we would kind of expect. And so we thought, well, we're just going to go into this premises and basically fit it out with what we want. And so we've kind of got that, and of course that's all available through the cloud as well. So we'd see who's working too hard at night. From a technical perspective, you know, we've turned things on, and these are really simple things like multi-factor authentication. So what that means is, if I want to access my Outlook or any of my systems, not only do I have to type in my password, but I've got to have my phone with me or another means of identifying that I am who I am. So kind of like when you use your internet banking and you're trying to make a transfer or something like that, it will send an authorization to your phone, and you pick up your phone and say approved or not approved. So we've incorporated multi-factor authentication, including things like we're looking into the biometric sort of fingerprint scans for getting into our systems. So it's even harder. We've also looked at and adopting sort of the encryption. This is at rest, so where information is sort of stored during transit. So when we're certain clients, we will ensure that encryption is turned on for emails, as well as on-device encryption. So using things like BitLocker, which is provided under your Windows 10 professional licenses. But it's great to have all of this sort of stuff and to improve. But you know, I only know what I know. Lisa only knows what she knows, right? And so it's one of those things where you have to get external providers on board to basically test your systems. So we regularly we're looking to sort of ensure that we've got our cybersecurity audits sort of in place. And the great thing is, you know, we're getting one done sort of shortly, and we're being able to test whether or not we open emails that we shouldn't open, like things with attachments with malware potentially. So it's always kind of good to for them to, you know, on top of.